Welcome back to the Iron Mike podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wollard. Today, no video again. I know that disappoints some of the people watching on YouTube. I've been on the hunt at the house for the best setup to lighting, everything like that, just to be able to film a video. And I think that if I rearrange my office upstairs one more time, my wife is going to kill me, and John, my business partner, is going to make fun of me some more. So today, just me and just audio. Today, I kind of wanted to go over just some frequently asked questions from clients, from followers, from things like that. People that just fairly popular questions that people want to know. I just want to kind of go through a top 5 or so questions that hopefully can help you as listeners out. Society kind of pushes things a certain direction, and so being able to kind of mediate that and be able to just give y'all the accurate information. A lot of times whether it's supplement companies, whether it's fitness influencers, whatever it is, wherever you get your information from, a lot of times there is an agenda behind what they say and what they do. And so if I can come in and kind of give you the middle ground, it's not always black and white. Most of the time it's gray. If anybody says always anything in the health and fitness industry, then usually that's not the truth. So I'm going to attempt to answer some of these. So the first question I have is, should I bump up the weights that they use? How do I know when to kind of increase the weight? When should I drop the weight? Basically, kind of an overarching, how hard should I train type of deal. And we'll really dive into how hard you should train in a later podcast. But for a lot of you that are doing, you're in some sort of a fat loss phase, you're new to lifting weights, the intensity's there, you're going from 5 pounds to 10 pounds, little things like that. That's kind of usually the question I'm getting from clients is, how do I know when I need to bump up the weights? And so usually it's a soreness type of situation. So for a lot of people, they're sore every workout. That's typically me. And so if there's ever a point where I'm not sore after workouts, then usually that's when I need to start training harder or kind of look at my particular workout split. But then there's a lot of people who are never sore. And so then when you are sore after a workout, kind of taking note of that and seeing, okay, do I need to back off a little bit? Do I need to why was I sore this time as opposed to other times? Am I training too hard? But most often for my clients and people that are new to lifting and things like that, you need to bump up the weights when it's just too easy. Simple as that. All of my clients, after their workouts, they have a chance to rate the workout and things like that, the difficulties. And so if you're rating workouts in the 2 or 3, 4, honestly even 5 range, if it's just kind of middle of the road, it was fine. Then I would say go ahead and try to bump up the weights. A lot of my clients do circuits, so 4 to 5 rounds of these particular exercises. And so what I always encourage them to do is, if you're using 8 pounds and it's just kind of middle of the road, we'll start, round number 1 with 10s and drop back down if you need to. In the later rounds, as fatigue and things like that start setting in. But that progressive overload, that slow, just trying to get a little bit better each time you do a workout is super important for building muscle and for getting stronger and for increasing your stamina and your cardio and things like that as well. So it's always important to each time you're doing a workout just to try to get a little bit better than you were the time before that. So yeah, that pretty much encompasses it. Dropping the weight, kind of paying attention to whenever your form starts getting bad, whenever, that's usually it. Whenever your form starts getting bad, whenever you can't control the weight anymore, whenever you're, only completing 3 or 4 reps in a 30-second period, then I would probably drop the weight back down, which there's nothing wrong with that. Even in the middle of a set, you've got all your dumbbells laid out there for you. Dropping the weight down to a lighter weight to kind of finish out that set before moving on to the next exercise, I think is an awesome way to do that. So that's kind of encompasses all of that one. I'd make sure to push yourself, but also know that whenever your form starts slipping up, then to go ahead and switch to a lighter weight until you finish it out. Next question we had was, what's the best diet? Talked about this one in the last episode, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's just what you can sustain, a diet that you can stick to. There's more optimal ones, obviously, when it comes to calories and protein and things like that. If you're trying to build muscle, then you want to make sure that you're getting adequate protein. But even in a fat loss phase, you also want to make sure that you're getting adequate protein. But across the board, when your calories and protein are the same, as far as whatever diet you decide to follow, it really doesn't matter. It's all personal preference and kind of what you stick to. If you don't like, fish and things like that, then I wouldn't, recommend a Mediterranean diet and things like that. Everything can work for you. It just kind of depends on your personal preference, or a lot of people, it depends on your health issues and things like that. And so making sure that taking all of that into account, figuring out what types of foods you enjoy. Obviously, you would not want to stick to an Oreo diet, but figuring out the foods you do enjoy, the lean meats that you like, things like that, eggs and poultry and whatever, lean ground turkey. I pretty much alternate between ground turkey and chicken. I kind of bounce back and forth between those proteins, and then I enjoy pasta and rice. And then I kind of pick a veggie. And so that's just typically the meals and things like that I eat every day. I'm a creature of habit, so I can eat mostly the same foods every day and just kind of mix up the sauces that I put on things. But overall, the best diet that you can follow is just the one that you can stick to, and one you can see yourself following long term. If you're following a diet for 3 months, but it's going to end after that 3 months, what do you do after that? And so trying to figure out that's why I follow the if it fits your macros kind of concept of calculating my protein, carbs, and fats, and then deciding, depending on my fitness goals, kind of where everything needs to align. And then I just fill in, I treat that like a budget, and I apply foods that are going to help take up that budget. So super easy concept to follow that I've found to be super flexible and works really well with my clients. So that is the diet, quote unquote, that I stick to. Next question, what's your protein, carb, and fat percentages be when you're in a deficit, maintenance, and surplus? And so this is another one that I won't even say there's myths, but people think that when you're bulking, when you're trying to put on a lot of size and a lot of muscle, that your protein has to be insanely high. Most people, they're either super deficient in protein, they're getting way less protein than they need, or you gotta go the opposite direction, they're getting way more protein than they need. Most research is, you can do a gram per pound of lean body mass. You can do between 1.6 and 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, if you want to kind of do that math. But the whole, 1 gram per pound of body weight, if you're 400 pounds, you do not need 400 grams of protein. But also there's a lot of people that are getting, 50, 60 grams of protein in a week, and that's just drastically low, especially if you're working out and you're doing resistance training and things like that. The increased protein is always going to help. So for a deficit, the way I like to set up my calories, I think in a deficit, protein is much more important than in a surplus. In a surplus, you're trying to get calories. You've got the excess carbs and fats, and even eventually you've got the excess body fat in a surplus to keep your body from breaking down lean body mass. And so the protein doesn't become as important. The higher your body fat percentage is, your protein isn't as important because you have your excess body fat stores to use for energy. Protein is still important, don't get me wrong. I always recommend a high protein diet, but my protein really doesn't fluctuate too much throughout a bulk or a cut. It's when you get in those like sub 10% body fat ranges that your protein really has to start increasing, because you don't have those excess body fat stores to really pull from anymore. So when it comes to maintaining that lean body mass, you want to have that increased protein. And then as far as maintenance and a surplus, honestly, the only macronutrient I ever really fluctuate very often are carbs. And that's because I enjoy carbs. So if I'm in a surplus, that I'm enjoying, 350 grams of carbs a day. And then as I go into a maintenance phase, and maybe I'm dropping it to 300 to 320. And then as I'm leaning out, then we're dropping it to 275. And as I hit plateaus, and I'm just pulling from those carbs. But my protein usually is anywhere between 200 and 240 grams of protein a day. And my fats are, 75 grams a day, if that. Fats I can usually do without, but I want my rice, I want my noodles, I want all those sorts of things. And so that's kind of how I break down my how I break down my macronutrients. I set my calories first once I know what my calories are, and that's dependent on if I'm trying to put on some size, put on some muscle, or if I'm just trying to be at maintenance for a little bit, or if I'm trying to be in a deficit to lose some body fat. Once I set those calories, then I set my protein up for where I kind of guess my lean body mass is at. And then I even add a few extra grams on top of that if I'm, just to be generous. I'd rather have too much protein than not enough. And then I'll set my fats anywhere between 20 to 25% of my total calories for the day, and then the rest go to carbs. And so that makes it super easy, because then as I'm bulking or cutting or maintenance, all I do is kind of adjust my carbs throughout the process. So it makes it super easy, and I like easy. I like flexibility. And so, those are my go-tos for that. Another question, should I bulk or cut first? I get this one a lot, and this is kind of common throughout the fitness industry, and it kind of depends on how far you're in one direction or the other. If you're 170 pounds and have never lifted before, and you've got a little bit of body fat on you, but if you've never lifted before, you don't have a lot of muscle, your metabolism is probably fairly slow, and so I would go ahead and just do the bulk first. And again, bulking does not mean that you have to eat 5,000 calories a day and do this dirty bulk and just like eat a ton of food and jack that body fat way up while trying to build muscle. If you're new to lifting, then you really don't have to bulk at all. Just by adding in resistance training, you're going to build muscle. And so even if you're in a caloric deficit, that's one of the only times unless you're on steroids, it's one of the only times that you can lose body fat and build muscle fairly efficiently. Once you become an intermediate to advanced lifter, and kind of beyond that, you're doing kind of this middle of the road, like I'm going to build muscle but also lean out at the same time. Yes, it can happen, but it's a much longer process than if you were to do like, okay, I'm going to do 400 to 500 calorie bulk, and really hit the weights super heavy, make sure my pre and post workout's good, follow on all these steps. But beyond that, it's really much more efficient to do a bulk first or a cut first. So that being said, if you're new to lifting and you're just kind of this, skinny fat phase where you have, you're not necessarily, you're not obese, you're not anything like that, but you just lack a lot of muscle, I would do the bulk first. I would learn how to lift, I would learn proper form, and I would just get as strong as I can. That first year of training is when the muscle is going to come on really quick. You're going to make and see a lot of changes in your body. And so I would really push going through that bulk first. And then once you get to, 185, 190, then you can, start a cut, or you can implement some mini cuts, 3 to 4 weeks of just dropping your calories for a bit and then going back to maintenance. You have a lot of different options from that point. If you're up in the 200 to 300, 280 to 300 range, okay, now we're talking like, okay, that's some significant weight that we really need to get off. So I would definitely do the cut first, and that's more for health reasons than it would be for anything else. Regardless of the bulk or the cut, the only thing that's going to change is your diet. I would still lift the same. I would still burn calories. I'd still focus on getting 10,000 steps in. I'm still going to lift as heavy as I can. Even sticking that 6 to 15 rep range. The lower reps for your heavier lifts, and the higher for like your big compound lifts, and then the higher reps for the for more of your accessory movements and things like that. But I always use my brother as an example. Hopefully he has in mind, being podcast famous for a bit. But senior year of high school, he was 140 pounds soaking wet, had zero muscle to his name, just super skinny, skin and bones. And but before going to college, he wanted to put on some size, and so we did that. We got him on. Matt, he just didn't like to eat. I used to always think, oh, he eats junk all the time. How is he so skinny? When I'm like fighting my entire life just to stay lean. And but he would just kind of graze throughout the day. He would eat Skittles and Pop-Tarts and things like that, but he would just pour them into a bowl and just eat like one every 30 minutes type of thing. When it came to like Skittles, or then Pop-Tarts, he'd eat that and be good for 4 hours. And so he really wasn't eating that much. And so we started working out. He wasn't very hungry very often, so we started implementing the mass gainer shakes just to get a lot of calories in a short amount of time. Tracked his protein, lifted heavy every night, kid got super strong, put on a lot of size, and it was awesome. And then I'll never forget getting that text around Christmas of that year, asking me how to get rid of a gut, because he had started adding in his freshman, 15 and whatever, and hadn't been working out as often and such. So that's typically, all I have to say, that's typically the route that I go. If you're just skinny and you're new to lifting, or even if your body fat's a little bit higher than you'd like, you're kind of that middle of the road where you could lose some body fat, but you also don't have much muscle. I think you're gonna be much happier with your physique, and the cut is gonna be much easier later on if you put on some muscle first, do a bulk. It doesn't have to be anything crazy or significant. You don't have to be in 1,000 to 2,000 calorie surplus to build muscle and recover well. So that's the route that I would go there. Lastly, last question for this episode is, I'm sore. So what do I do? So soreness, again, I kind of talked about in the first one. It's definitely not always a gauge of if your workout was successful, if your workout was efficient, if you're building muscle, even if you're getting better, things like that. It's kind of following your body's track record. So if you're used to being sore and all of a sudden you're not, okay, now we might need to change up the programming a little bit. But if you're never sore and now you are, okay, let's look and see, did I do more than normal? Did I implement some new movements? Am I going too heavy? How long am I staying sore for? Things like that. So those are some of the questions I ask my clients, and make sure my clients kind of start to think for themselves too, is what are all the variables, what changed, what didn't change, and things like that. Soreness is inevitably part of it. You're most likely going to get sore at some point. If you're super new to lifting, then you're definitely going to be sore. Anything beyond kind of 2 to 3 days of soreness is when you kind of say, okay, the volume might have been a little bit too much, or did I do something wrong? Was my form good? Was my form spot on? That sort of deal. Did I make form corrections? And so now I'm doing the movement right, and so that's why I'm sore. Lots of things like that. The biggest thing is movement. That's going to be the biggest thing for your recovery. If you're moving and you're stretching, you're making sure you're warming up before you work out and cooling down after. With stretching, making sure that you're doing a little bit of cardio on the front end, then you're doing some dynamic warm-ups, and then you're doing your lifts. You want to make sure that before any of your workouts that you're taking your body through, it's the entire range of motion essentially for the workouts for that day. So if I'm bench pressing, you want to make sure that my shoulders are going, getting a full range of motion. I want to make sure that I'm doing internal and external rotations, and then I'm doing some face pulls to warm up my rear delts, and making sure my triceps are warmed up, and my lats are going to be engaged on a bench press. And so making sure that those are warmed up. Any exercises that I do, bench, squat, deadlift, are usually going to be the compound lifts I start out with. And so those are full body movements. Even bench press, you think of it as chest and triceps, but my force starts from my feet and transfers all the way through my body into the lockout at the top. So everything's involved, everything's tight, and everything's engaged from my core to my lats, shoulders, triceps, chest, driving through my legs. And so everything needs to be warmed up. I'm sure any of you who were new to bench pressing can remember, the lats or the cramps you'd get in your lats, or cramps you'd get in your glutes, or anything like that from trying to push and get it up. And so making sure that the entire body is warmed up is super, super important. So once that's taken care of, once you know that you're warming up properly, the next thing I would probably take a look at is your diet, making sure that your protein is adequate. A lot of people that are used to being sore for a long time, their protein's usually a little bit low. So making sure that protein's there. On top of that, still speaking nutrition, pre and post workout, making sure that your body's set up to be anabolic before you work out. So making sure you're getting some carbs and protein pre-workout. That way the protein's already there and ready to repair the muscle when it happens. And then once the breakdown happens, and then also post-workout, making sure that you have carbs and protein again, to get the protein to the muscle quicker, just to help with that recovery process. And so really it's kind of like this from the moment you have your pre-workout meal to the moment you have your post-workout meal. It's kind of this 5 to 6 hour window essentially. So if you get your pre-workout out meal in, and then you immediately hit the gym, and meal, hour, workout lasts an hour. So you got this 2 hours. So you have like this 3 to 4 hours to get your post-workout meal. So that need for a post-workout shake post-workout isn't as crucial. It's, instead of it being an anabolic window, it's more of a anabolic door. You've got a much longer time frame than what was originally thought. That being said, there's nothing wrong with getting a protein shake right after you work out. A lot of people aren't hungry post-workout, and so adding in that protein shake super quick, it's super easy, something you can travel with, etc. And so making sure that you're getting in that post-workout nutrition is really going to help with that recovery process. The sooner you can get it in, the better, but you do have some wiggle room there. And then lastly, just taking care of your body outside of it. My legs usually are what are sore the longest, but I'm fairly sedentary, whether it's, working on client programs, checking in on clients, filming check-in videos, doing podcast stuff. I sit down a lot more than I used to. And so when I go to the gym and I smash legs for an hour and a half and then immediately come home, I'll have my post-workout meal. All that's usually on point, but I come home and then I just sit, for however many hours of the day, and don't take the time to, get up and go, walk outside, enjoy the weather, whatever that is. So making sure that you're really stretching post-workout, foam rolling, doing cool down walks, whatever that looks like, and then getting up throughout the day, making sure the day's following, that you're moving around, that you're really stretching and just staying mobile. That's super important for that recovery process. So anyways, that kind of concludes this episode. If you have any comments yourself, feel free to message me, write them in the YouTube comments, things like that. I want to be able to answer what you guys want to know, guys and girls want to know. I can talk all day about, things that I enjoy talking about, but I want to know what, myths that you guys are struggling to kind of figure out. What are your biggest hangups? How are you doing on your New Year's resolutions? What tips are you trying to figure out for sticking to that sort of thing? I want to be able to help answer any of those questions. So my Instagram is Mike_fit-by-strength. And then my Facebook page, Mike Wollard is my personal, or Mike Wollard Training is my fitness page. Wollard is Wollard, for those of you who don't know. My last name does not sound like it is said, or is not spelled like it is said. So those are my pages. Feel free to reach out, shoot me DMs with your questions. I'm trying to be more present on my stories and posting, those at least once or twice a week of, hey, ask me your questions, and let those be featured in the podcast, whether you want to shout out or you don't want to shout out. But just put those questions in there, and that helps give me stuff to talk about, and keep educating everybody, making fitness fun and easy. So yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you in the next one.